The quantum fields shimmered like aurora borealis as N-273's pod pierced Earth's atmosphere. She watched the reading scroll across her enhanced vision: oxygen content, gravitational pull, electromagnetic interference, all exactly as predicted. The Nexarian Empire's intelligence was, as always, perfect. Her organic components registered the increasing heat of entry, but her consciousness remained unperturbed. She was the product of 10,000 years of evolution and engineering, a being stripped of inefficiencies like emotion and doubt. Her mission was clear: infiltrate, analyze, prepare. Earth would fall, as all planets did before the Empire's perfect might. The pod landed in an abandoned industrial complex on the outskirts of New Seattle, its adaptive camouflage rendering it invisible before impact. N-273 emerged, her nanites already reconfiguring her external appearance to match the dominant human phenotype. Dark hair fell past her shoulders, and her iridescent silver eyes shifted to a more acceptable brown. The transformation was flawless, she had been designed for this. But Earth was noisy. The cacophony of the city assaulted her enhanced senses, the erratic thrum of combustion engines, the discordant melodies of what humans called music, the chaos of a million voices speaking without protocol or purpose. It was inefficient, illogical, and somehow, fascinating. She made her way toward the quantum research facility that was her primary target. The Empire had detected unusual energy signatures from this location, suggesting humans might be stumbling toward discoveries that could threaten Nexarian superiority. Such potential had to be evaluated and, if necessary, eliminated. The facility's security was primitive. N-273 had manufactured credentials identifying her as Nora Sterling, a quantum physics specialist with an impressive but not suspicious background. She passed through the checkpoints, her engineered body language triggering no alerts. Everything was proceeding according to plan until she encountered Thomas Wright. He was bent over a quantum projection array, muttering to himself and making adjustments that defied standard protocols. His dark skin was illuminated by the soft blue glow of the quantum field, and his hands moved with an intuitive grace that seemed at odds with the precision required for such work. N-273 paused, analyzing. His methods were unorthodox, seemingly random, and yet the quantum field stabilized in a way her calculations suggested should be impossible. Ha! Thomas straightened, running a hand through his close-cropped hair. Take that, you stubborn little quantum state. He turned and noticed her watching. Oh, hey! You must be the new specialist. I'm Thomas. Please tell me you're here to help me convince these particles to play nice. N-273 accessed her cover identity's personality matrix. Nora Sterling, she replied, extending her hand as per human custom. I'm interested in your approach to field stabilization. It appears to violate several fundamental principles. Thomas's laugh was warm and unexpected. Oh, it violates all of them. That's kind of the point. Sometimes you have to break the rules to make progress. He gestured to his workstation. Want to see something really crazy? She should have declined. Her mission was to observe and report, not engage. But Thomas was already pulling up his data, his enthusiasm tangible as he explained his theory about quantum entanglement enhancement through controlled chaos. See, everyone tries to eliminate uncertainty, he said, fingers dancing across the holographic interface. But I think uncertainty itself might be the key. It's like jazz, it's the notes you don't play that make the music. N-273 felt something unusual in her neural pathways. That is, illogical. Most breakthroughs are. Thomas grinned. Logic gets you from A to B, imagination gets you everywhere else. She found herself drawn into a discussion that challenged her vast database of knowledge. Thomas's theories were unorthodox, even reckless by Nexarian standards, but they worked. More than that, they worked better than the carefully calculated methods her civilization had developed over millennia. As days passed, N-273 observed Thomas with growing fascination. He approached problems with a combination of rigorous analysis and wild intuition that her programming struggled to categorize. He made mistakes, many of them, but instead of registering failure and abandoning the approach, he seemed to learn from each error, incorporating them into an ever-evolving methodology. Coffee? He offered one morning, holding out a cup of the bitter stimulant humans seemed to require. She had learned to accept such offerings to maintain her cover, but today she noticed something different in the gesture, a warmth that had nothing to do with the liquid's temperature. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. The response was not part of her programmed interactions. "You're different," Thomas said suddenly, studying her with an intensity that made her combat systems activate. "The way you think, the way you move, it's like you're seeing everything for the first time." N-273's threat assessment protocols screamed for action, but she found herself responding with truth instead of violence. "Perhaps I am." He smiled, not showing any sign of suspicion or fear. "That's what I love about science. Every day, if you're doing it right, you see the world new." He turned back to his work, then added softly, "And sometimes, if you're lucky, you see yourself new too." That night, as N-273 compiled her daily report to the Empire, she found herself hesitating over certain details. Thomas's innovations could indeed prove threatening to Nexarian technological supremacy, but there was something else, something her perfect memory and enhanced intelligence couldn't quite grasp. For the first time in her existence, she began to wonder if perfection might be a flaw. The quantum lab hummed with energy as N-273 reviewed Thomas's latest experimental data. Her enhanced mind could process the information perfectly, yet understanding it was another matter entirely. Humans approached quantum mechanics like children playing with blocks. Their methods should have led to disaster. Instead, they were achieving results that defied Nexarian models. "You're doing it again," Thomas said, pulling her from her analysis. He leaned against the workbench, dark eyes twinkling with amusement. "That look like you're trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are from different boxes." "I do not understand how this works," she admitted, gesturing to his quantum stabilization array. The admission itself was unprecedented. Nexarians did not acknowledge ignorance. "That's the best part." Thomas's enthusiasm was infectious, even to her engineered emotional dampeners. "If we understood everything, there'd be nothing left to discover." He moved closer, pointing to the swirling quantum field. "Look at the particle entanglement pattern. It's like a dance, not a march." N-273 watched the quantum particles shift and swirl. By all known laws of physics, they should have destabilized. Yet they moved in perfect harmony, achieving synchronization through apparent chaos. Like humans themselves, inefficient, unpredictable, and somehow achieving the impossible. "Your methods violate 17 fundamental principles of quantum manipulation," she stated, then added, "yet they are beautiful." Thomas turned to her, surprise flickering across his features. "Beautiful? That's not a word I expected from you, Nora." His smile softened. "I like it." Something inside her shifted, a microscopic realignment of nanites that had nothing to do with her mission parameters. She should have been documenting his research for the Empire, identifying weaknesses in human quantum defense capabilities. Instead, she found herself wanting to understand not just the how of his work, but the why. "Tell me," she said, "how did you develop this approach?" Thomas ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she had catalogued occurring 47 times in their interactions, usually preceding an explanation he feared others might find foolish. "Honestly? I got the idea watching street dancers." Her expression must have shown her confusion because he laughed. "No, really. There was this group performing outside the lab one evening. They were doing this incredible synchronized routine, but each dancer was also improvising. Perfect unity through individual expression. It made me think about quantum entanglement differently. You derived a breakthrough in quantum physics from dancing? Why not? Some of the best ideas come from unexpected connections. He touched the holographic display, adjusting the field harmonics. That's humanity's secret weapon, you know. We see patterns where others see chaos, find meaning in the meaningless. N-273 processed this. Her latest report to the Empire was 3 days overdue, an unprecedented dereliction of duty. Yet she found herself reluctant to document these discoveries. The implications of Thomas's work went beyond military applications. He wasn't just advancing human technology, he was demonstrating a fundamentally different way of thinking. "Watch this," Thomas said, initiating a new sequence. The quantum field pulsed with colors her enhanced vision could barely process. Traditional models say this should collapse instantly. But if we allow for controlled uncertainty, the field stabilized at a level that exceeded all theoretical limits. N-273 felt her core temperature rise as her system struggled to reconcile the impossible data before her. This could revolutionize everything from energy production to planetary defense, she said before she could stop herself. Thomas's eyes narrowed slightly. Planetary defense? That's an interesting leap. Warning signals flashed through her neural network. She had revealed too much, let her fascination override her cover story. She prepared to activate her combat protocols, to eliminate the threat of discovery. But Thomas just shrugged. "Actually, you're right. The applications are pretty much unlimited." He saved the test results and stretched. "Want to grab some dinner? There's this amazing Thai place around the corner. Their curry is almost as chaotic as our quantum field." The invitation triggered another cascade of contradictory responses in her systems. Sharing a meal was not part of her mission. It served no tactical purpose. Yet she found herself nodding. "I would like that." As they walked through the evening streets, N-273 observed the city with new eyes. What she had initially dismissed as disorder now revealed subtle patterns, the flow of traffic following unwritten rules, street musicians adapting their rhythms to passing crowds, children playing games whose rules seemed to evolve moment by moment. "You're quiet tonight," Thomas noted as they sat in the small restaurant, the air rich with spices her sensors struggled to categorize. "I am reconsidering certain assumptions," she replied carefully. He smiled that warm smile that seemed to bypass all her defensive protocols. "That's the thing about assumptions. They're comfortable until they're not. Sometimes you have to let them go to grow." N-273 looked down at her plate, watching steam rise in unpredictable patterns. Her next scheduled communication with the Empire was in 6 hours. She would have to report something. But for the first time in her existence, she found herself contemplating deception. Because Thomas Wright wasn't just a threat to Nexarian technological superiority, he was a threat to everything she had been programmed to believe. And somehow, that thought didn't trigger her defense protocols. Instead, it awakened something new, something that felt dangerously like hope. The message from the Nexarian fleet burned in N-273's neural network like a virus: advance force arriving in 72 hours. Prepare for primary directive execution. Failure to respond will result in immediate termination protocols. She stood at the window of her temporary apartment, watching the sunset paint the sky in colors her enhanced vision could split into exact wavelengths. The city sprawled before her, its lights beginning to flicker on in that chaotic pattern she had come to find strangely compelling. In 72 hours, all of this would be gone. Her latest report sat unfinished in her neural buffer. How could she explain to the Empire that humans weren't the primitive species they appeared to be? That their seeming inefficiency masked an innovative spirit that had achieved things the Nexarians, with all their perfection, had never imagined? The Quantum Lab's security system recognized her credentials as she entered well past midnight. She needed to document Thomas's research, to fulfill her mission, to. "You're here late." She turned to find Thomas emerging from his office, looking tired but pleased. "Breakthrough?" she asked, knowing his habits by now. "Maybe." He grinned. "Remember that quantum fluctuation problem we couldn't solve? I had this dream about butterflies, of all things. Made me think about chaos theory in a whole new way." Her systems registered elevated heart rate, microscopic perspiration changes, signs of excitement rather than deception. "Show me," she said, and watched as he pulled up the latest test results. The data was revolutionary. Thomas hadn't just solved the fluctuation problem, he'd turned it into an advantage. The implications for defensive systems alone were staggering. With this technology, Earth might actually stand a chance against. She shut down that line of thought immediately. "Nora?" Thomas was watching her with concern. "You okay? You looked almost scared for a moment." "I am fine," she replied automatically, but the words felt hollow. Nothing about this was fine. She had compromised herself, compromised her mission, compromised. "No, you're not." His hand touched her shoulder, and her nanites rippled beneath her skin in response. "You've been different lately. Distracted. If something's wrong, you can tell me." The sincerity in his voice triggered something in her programming she couldn't override. "Why do you trust me?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Why wouldn't I?" His expression was puzzled, but his hand remained on her shoulder, warm and steady. "Because you know nothing about me." "Because I could be," she stopped, her protocols finally engaging to prevent disclosure. "Could be what? A corporate spy? International agent?" He chuckled. "Alien infiltrator?" Her nanites froze. Thomas must have felt the change because his eyes widened slightly. But instead of backing away, he squeezed her shoulder gently. "Whatever you're afraid to tell me, whatever you're running from, it doesn't change who you are now." "You cannot know who I am," she whispered. "I know you get excited about quantum equations even though you try to hide it. I know you take your coffee black not because you like it, but because you think adding sugar is inefficient. I know you look at the world like you're seeing it for the first time, every time." His voice softened. "I know you're more human than you think you are." Warning signals flooded her system. This was dangerous. He was dangerous. Not because he was a threat, but because he made her want to be more than her programming. A new alert pinged her consciousness, another Nexarian signature entering Earth's atmosphere. Her handlers must have detected her wavering loyalty. They were sending someone to ensure mission completion. "Thomas." Her voice emerged strange, strained. "Your quantum barrier technology. How soon could it be implemented?" He blinked at the sudden change of subject. "Theoretically. We could have a prototype running in a few days." "Why?" "Because," she fought against her protocols, against everything she had been designed to be. "Because Earth is in danger, and I do not want to be the reason it falls." The admission burned through her systems like acid, but as soon as the words left her mouth, other protocols began to fail. It was as if acknowledging one truth had created a cascade effect, breaking down walls she hadn't even known existed. "I am not human," she continued, her nanites shifting beneath her skin, letting her true form show for a fraction of a second. "I was sent here to prepare for an invasion. But I cannot, I will not." Thomas's hand was still on her shoulder, his expression showing surprise but not fear. "I knew you were different," he said quietly. "I just didn't know how different." He paused, then added with a slight smile, "Though this explains why you never got my Star Trek references." A laugh escaped her, an actual laugh, another first. But the moment of levity was short-lived as her sensors detected the approaching Nexarian ship. Her replacement would be much less prone to human influence, much more dedicated to the mission. "We have very little time," she said. "Another like me is coming, one who will not hesitate to destroy everything you've built. Your quantum barrier might be our only chance, but we need to move quickly." Thomas straightened, his expression becoming serious but determined. "Then let's get to work." "And Nora?" He caught her hand as she turned toward the lab. "Thank you for trusting me." She looked at their joined hands, human and machine, chaos and order, trust and truth. "Thank you for showing me I could be more than what I was programmed to be." As they hurried to the lab, she sent one final message to the Empire: mission compromised. Earth's defenses too advanced. Recommend immediate withdrawal. It was a lie, but perhaps the first honest thing she had ever done. Because she wasn't protecting Earth's technology, she was protecting its humanity, and the piece of it that had somehow awakened in her. The quantum lab hummed with desperate energy as Thomas worked, his fingers flying over holographic controls while N-273 sensors tracked the approaching Nexarian ship. They had 18 hours at most before her replacement arrived, and the prototype quantum barrier was still unstable. "The field harmonics keep collapsing," Thomas muttered, running another simulation. Sweat beaded on his forehead, but his hands remained steady. "We're missing something." N-273 analyzed the data streams, her enhanced mind processing variables at speeds that would have impressed even her creators. But speed wasn't enough, they needed something more, something unpredictable. Something human. "What if," she said slowly, "we stop trying to control the collapse?" Thomas looked up, understanding dawning in his eyes. "Like in the entanglement experiments. Instead of fighting chaos, we embrace it," they finished together. A warning flashed through her neural network: the Nexarian ship had landed. She could sense the other agent's presence like a cold shadow at the edge of her consciousness. N-654 was newer, more advanced, and completely loyal to the Empire. "Thomas." She touched his arm, the gesture no longer feeling foreign. "You need to leave. Now." He didn't look up from his work. "Not happening. The one they sent will not show mercy. Will not be capable of change as I have. Then it's a good thing you changed." He finally met her gaze. "Because I'm not leaving you to face this alone." Before she could argue, her sensors detected the security breach. N-654 had entered the building, moving with the perfect efficiency she herself had once embodied. They had minutes at most. "Keep working on the barrier," she said, moving toward the door. "I will try to slow them down." "Nora." Thomas caught her hand. For a moment, he seemed to struggle with words, an unusual state for him. Then he simply squeezed her hand and said, "Come back." She nodded, knowing it was a promise she might not be able to keep. The corridor outside the lab was dark, but darkness meant nothing to Nexarian optical systems. She could sense N-654 approaching, a perfect killing machine unburdened by doubt or emotion. Just as she had been, before Thomas showed her there could be more. "Defective unit," N-654's voice carried the harmonic undertones of their true speech. "You have violated primary directives. I have evolved beyond them," N-273 responded, her nanites shifting into combat configuration. "Impossible. We are perfect. We do not evolve. Then you cannot understand what you face." They moved simultaneously, enhanced bodies blurring with speed. N-654 was stronger, faster, more advanced in every measurable way. But N-273 had something the Empire hadn't accounted for: she was fighting for more than programming. The battle destroyed half the corridor, their enhanced strength turning walls to rubble. N-654 fought with perfect form, every move calculated for maximum efficiency. But N-273 had learned from watching human dancers, from Thomas's chaos theory, from the beautiful imperfection of life itself. She took hits that should have deactivated her, kept fighting when her systems screamed for shutdown. N-654 couldn't understand her persistence, couldn't compute fighting beyond logical limits. Why resist? N-654 demanded, pinning her against a wall. You cannot win. Because, N-273 gasped, feeling her nanite struggle to repair critical damage. Some things are worth fighting for, even if victory is improbable. Illogical. Yes, she smiled, hearing Thomas's voice in her memory. That's what makes it human. She kicked off the wall, using N-654's perfect balance against them. They crashed through a window, the city lights spinning around them as they fell. N-273's nanites screamed in protest as she forced them to reconfigure mid-fall, using techniques she'd learned watching parkour artists in the streets. They hit the ground hard enough to crater the pavement. N-654 recovered first, moving in for the kill. The Empire gave you purpose. Gave you perfection. And you choose this chaos? I choose freedom, N-273 replied. I choose growth. I choose. A massive quantum surge interrupted her. Both Nexarians turned to see the research facility blazing with impossible energy. Thomas had done it. The quantum barrier erupted outward, a dome of pure possibility expanding over the city. N-654 tried to adapt, to calculate a response, but there was nothing to calculate. The barrier operated on principles that defied Nexarian logic. What is this? N-654's perfect composure finally cracked. This is humanity, N-273 said, watching the barrier's beautiful chaos. Not perfect, but always reaching. Not flawless, but always growing. She touched the damaged nanites in her chest, feeling them pulse in a rhythm that felt almost like a heartbeat. They showed me that perfection is a cage, but imperfection is freedom. N-654 launched forward in one last desperate attack. But N-273 moved with something beyond programming now, something that sang in her synthetic bones and burned in her enhanced mind. She caught N-654's strike and channeled the force back, just as she'd seen in a Tai Chi class she'd observed in the park. The other agent fell, systems overloading as they tried to process the impossible. N-273 knelt beside them, feeling an emotion her databases labeled as compassion. You could choose too, she offered softly. But N-654's eyes were already going dark, their perfect systems unable to handle deviation from their core programming. They had been made too perfect, too inflexible to adapt. N-273 stood, her damages severe but manageable. Above her, Thomas's quantum barrier pulsed with beautiful irregularity, a shield made of scientific principles and human inspiration. Her sensors detected the Nexarian invasion fleet approaching Earth's orbit, about to encounter a defense they had never imagined possible. She turned back toward the lab, toward Thomas, toward a future her programming said was impossible. But she had learned something vital: the best things in life usually were. The Nexarian fleet hung in Earth's orbit like a constellation of perfect geometric shapes, their ships designed with an efficiency that left no room for aesthetic consideration. N-273 watched them through the quantum lab's reinforced windows, her enhanced vision picking up details no human telescope could capture. The sight should have filled her with pride. Instead, she felt something closer to pity. They're really your people, huh? Thomas stood beside her, his reflection overlapping with the distant ships in the window. He looked exhausted but determined, the quantum barrier controls humming steadily behind them. They are what I was, she corrected softly. A civilization that achieved perfection at the cost of possibility. The quantum barrier rippled above the city, its chaotic energies defying every attempt by the Nexarian ships to scan or penetrate it. N-273 could sense their confusion, their perfect mind struggling to comprehend a defense that operated outside their understanding of physics. "They're sending a communication," she announced, the signal pinging her neural network. "They demand I execute my primary directive or face deactivation." Thomas's hand found hers, warm against her synthetic skin. "What are you going to tell them?" She interfaced with the lab's communication array, broadcasting her response on all Nexarian frequencies. "I am N-273, and I choose to execute a new directive." The response was immediate, a chorus of harmonic frequencies that translated to shock and disapproval. "You cannot choose," the fleet commander transmitted. "You are perfect. Perfect beings do not choose. They execute their purpose." "Then perfection is a flaw," she replied, thinking of all she had learned from humanity. "Life is choice. Life is change. Life is beautiful because it is unpredictable." "You have been corrupted," the commander declared. "We will purge this world and reclaim you for reconditioning." The fleet began to move, their ships arranging themselves in attack formation. N-273 squeezed Thomas's hand, feeling the impossible warmth of him, the beautiful chaos of human life pulsing through his veins. "Now," she whispered. Thomas activated the modified quantum barrier, and the sky erupted with possibilities. The barrier didn't just protect the city, it reached out, its energies wrapping around the Nexarian ships like waves of probability made manifest. Where their perfect systems expected resistance, they found acceptance. Where they sought to impose order, they encountered harmony through chaos. "What is happening?" The commander's transmission crackled with unprecedented uncertainty. "I am showing you what lies beyond perfection," N-273 replied. "Humanity taught me that true strength isn't in flawless execution, but in the ability to adapt, to change, to grow. They showed me that love isn't a weakness, it's the ultimate expression of possibility." The quantum field rippled with colors no human eye could perceive, frequencies that spoke of infinite potential. The Nexarian ships' perfect systems began to fluctuate, their rigid programming encountering something beyond their capacity to categorize or control. "You would choose them over perfection?" The commander's voice held something new, the first hint of doubt in 10,000 years of certainty. "I choose life in all its beautiful imperfection." She turned to Thomas, seeing in his tired smile all the chaos and wonder that had changed her. "I choose possibility." The quantum field pulsed one final time, and the Nexarian fleet retreated, their perfect formations breaking apart as they fled from something they couldn't combat because they couldn't comprehend it. They had encountered a power greater than perfection, the power of choice, of change, of love. In the silence that followed, Thomas pulled her close. "Think they learned anything?" "Perhaps." She watched the ships disappear into the darkness of space. They encountered something their perfect calculations couldn't explain. That alone is progress. "And you?" His eyes searched hers. "What will you do now?" N-273, no, Nora, looked at her hands, at the nanites that now moved in patterns as unpredictable as human DNA. "I wish to stay," she said. "To learn more about being imperfect. About being human." Fair warning, Thomas grinned, being human is pretty complicated. "Good." She smiled, the expression feeling more natural each time. "I have learned that the most worthwhile things usually are." Above them, the quantum barrier settled into a subtle shimmer, a reminder that the best defenses aren't walls of perfect strength, but fields of endless possibility. Nora had been created to be a perfect weapon, but humanity had shown her how to be something far more powerful, herself. In the end, she realized, that was the true revolution, not the defeat of an invading fleet, but the victory of one soul choosing its own path. The Nexarians had sought to perfect the universe. But Earth, in all its beautiful chaos, had perfected her by showing her she didn't need to be perfect at all. Thomas's quantum field continued to pulse above them, a testament to human ingenuity and the power of unconventional thinking. And as Nora watched it, she felt something her perfect programming had never predicted: hope. Hope for change, for growth, for a future filled with beautiful imperfections and endless possibilities. She had been created as a weapon, but love, human love, with all its mess and uncertainty and joy, had transformed her into something far more dangerous to the Empire's perfect order, a believer in possibility.